Welcome to the podcast. Callie's back there. We're ready to go. So, today's episode is really fun. And first of all, I want to start off by saying I'm sorry. I apologize to everybody for, disappearing for a little bit. Um that's the cool part about this podcast is I literally am doing this podcast with you guys as I am going through my own life as well, and I'm able to share things from like an authentic perspective. Low key, I was kind of going through my own like heartbreak at the time. um I'm not going to go too much into that, but I have designed this podcast to be able to like click on the first episode, and if you are going through a heartbreak, listen to episode 1, 2, 3, and it basically just be like therapy for you, free therapy, right? um the things that I share on this podcast, I have learned through years of experience. I have learned through therapy myself. I have learned through coping mechanisms that I have learned from professionals, just different things. So it's really fun and playful, and it's in its own way. But today's episode is really, really special. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. And I really thought about how I wanted to film this because, I had so many options. I'm actually looking into possibly doing a studio or renting out a studio to record my podcast. But I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to do it in my room. And not only am I going to do it in my room, but I'm going to do it in front of the mirror because today's episode is about self awareness. So, the way that I always talk about self awareness to other people is by saying, like, looking in the mirror. That's kind of like the little reference that I tell people. So, what better place than in my own home, in front of my own mirror? So, everybody grab their own sippy sip, drinky drink. By the way, this is, I made this. It's carrot juice with pineapple and lemon or lime. So, I have that on deck. And then, um, so I thought it'd be fun to not just be like looking at myself the whole time in the mirror, but for the we do have two types of people tuning into the podcast. We have our listeners, and then we have our viewers. So, speaking of which, if you are listening, um, please feel free to follow on Spotify. It's going to be How to Survive Heartbreak. If you are more of a visual person, please go ahead and follow on the YouTube, which is also How to Survive Heartbreak. And then I post updates, little clips, little fun reels, or TikToks. Um, on TikTok, it's also How to Survive Heartbreak, and on Instagram, it's the shorter version, so it's just Survive Heartbreak. Well, feel free to give it a follow and just kind of go in and you know check out the updates, check out just whenever new episodes are coming in. But yeah, guys, let's get right into it. So I'm going to be just doing a little simple makeup tutorial. Not tutorial, because I'm not going to be explaining like what I'm doing with my makeup. I'm just going to be doing my makeup while I'm chatting with you guys. But I did write out a few cool questions in this hat that we're going to pick through and start answering as I'm doing my makeup. Also, look at this hat, you guys. Like, sorry, not to put in the plug, but I did get this on Cakeworthy, non-sponsored. It has like a super cute little bow in the back, and then it says "Beady Beady Bomb Boo." Beady Beady Bomb Boo. It's supposed to be like fairy godmother, but then this is the part that I really like. It says, "If you had lost all your faith, I wouldn't be here, and here I am." Aw. Like fairy godmother, because if you lost all your faith, you wouldn't be able to see her. So yeah, I got this hat for next time I go to Disney, which is I don't know when because it'd be expensive. But alrighty, let's start. Gosh, I'm a chatter. All right, first thing before I read that question, we are going to start with moisturizing our face. I use beef tallow. Y'all don't know what this is. Y'all are missing out. let's start with that. Okay, it says, what do I believe is waiting on the other side of heartbreak once we lean into self awareness? Oh my gosh, I love this question. I'm so happy it's the first one. So, part of the reason why, I wanted to do this in front of the mirror with you guys is because I do realize that becoming a self aware person can be extremely uncomfortable. It's putting yourself on blast. It's exposing yourself. It's putting you in 4K. So it can be really, really difficult. And uncomfortable is the right word. It can be extremely uncomfortable to do so. So, in order to really like put myself in that position with you guys, I decided to do this episode in front of the mirror and be uncomfortable together. So, what do I believe is waiting on the other side of heartbreak once we lean into self awareness? So, a lot of the times when we're going through heartbreak, we think like, oh my gosh, this is like literally the worst thing in the world. Like, why is this happening to me? We tend to like ask God those types of questions, or whoever you want to ask. Like, why is this happening to me? Like, what did I do to deserve this? But I think we don't realize how beautiful of a gift it is to go through heartbreak and like I guess expose ourselves in that way, because anytime I have ever gone through a heartbreak, anytime I have ever been hurt, I always like, yes, I'm hurt, yes, it sucks, but I'm also like the most self-aware. I'm very aware of both my faults and sometimes only my faults. The strengths are a lot easier to look at in the mirror, especially when we're like hurt. But I think that our weaknesses can sometimes be like the most difficult part to confront. So, to answer this question, what do I believe is waiting on the other side of heartbreak once we lean into self awareness? I think on the other side of heartbreak is both our strengths and our weaknesses, but viewing our weaknesses from a place of strength. I hope that makes sense. So let's put it this way, just to make it more of an analogy for everyone, make it easy to understand. Imagine you were in like a beautiful, gorgeous like forest. It's like magical. There's like little tiny beautiful birds. There's like just all sorts of there's like beautiful waterfalls. There's like gorgeous, gorgeous things around you. And you're sitting there like on a little mountain or a little like hill. And instead of like looking at everything, the beautiful, like amazing things, and perhaps there's like a few cracks in the rocks, and perhaps there's like a few poisonous snakes there. Perhaps there's imperfections, but I think that's what makes it all beautiful and full of just full of wholeness. And you're sitting there on that hill with some binoculars, and you're zooming in into one specific place. Perhaps you're zooming into like, I don't know, the waterfall part and in the water, and you see like a beautiful fish. So you're zooming into the fish, and instead of being able to see everything completely with its totality, you're just fixating on that one thing. So that's the way life is before we are fully self-aware. We can hyperfixate on our strengths or hyperfixate on our weaknesses, but either way we're hyperfixating. So a lot of the times it inhibits us from being able to see ourselves with that totality, with that like wholeness that I was talking about. Like, I'm actually this whole big picture, not just a small little part of myself. So when we avoid looking in the mirror, that's what we're avoiding. We're avoiding looking at ourselves with that beautiful perspective. And a lot of times people shy away from that. They shy away from looking in the mirror because they're scared. And we'll get a little bit more into that with some of the other questions. But for now, that was a very long answer to the first question. Okie dokie. Second question. Why do people avoid looking inward, especially during heartbreak? So beautiful that you asked. Most people, so okay, let me put it this way. So, I remember one of my ex-boyfriends. It was this guy I really freaking loved. Like, I thought I was gonna marry him. We actually like all right, I'm not going to get into details about who it is, but um this guy I really really loved. And I remember he would be so uncomfortable like physically looking in the mirror, like in the actual mirror. Whenever we would walk by mirrors, he would just kind of like just go through them and maybe like look at himself for like 2 seconds and then like shy away. And I would always be like, why does he do that? Like he's a very attractive boy. Like why would he like shy away from looking in the mirror? And now, years later, like after we broke up and everything, I understand why. Because it wasn't just about like the physical mirror to him. It was that every time he would walk past a physical mirror, he was having to like he could see himself for his totality at that moment, but his weaknesses were like way too like bright for him, if you want to call it like that. Like they were just overwhelming. Yeah, they were too overwhelming. His weaknesses were way too overwhelming, and he just didn't want to deal with that, so he would just avoid mirrors at all costs, you know. And I I don't know, I was really inspired by him doing that for some odd reason. I was like, "Oh, okay, you can't do that. Well, I'm going to figure out how to do it for myself." So, when we first broke up, it was freaking difficult cuz, you know, there was a lot of things that, he was my mirror. He was my Yeah, he was my mirror in another person. He had a lot of the same weaknesses that I had. He struggled with a lot of the same things. So when I left that relationship, I was just left with all that mess. And I was like, oh my goodness, what do I do with this? So I was like, I feel overwhelmed. I feel like disheartened. This is just like way too much for me to deal with. Like, all I can see is my mess. I can't really point out like a lot of good qualities for myself, right? And I avoided it at the beginning. I just avoided it. I ran away from myself. I used a lot of coping mechanisms. I've I've talked a little bit about it on my Instagram, but like I used to just indulge in, it doesn't really matter, just like a lot of things that would make me avoid myself because I didn't want to look inward. And until I had it's not even strength, it was more like I had the courage to make a decision, and that decision was like, I'm gonna start looking inwardly. It wasn't even like I'm gonna make these changes or I'm gonna tackle this. It was just like I'm gonna make the decision that I'm gonna start looking inwardly. To answer this question, why do people avoid looking inward, especially during heartbreak? I think it's because they're scared of what they're gonna see in the mirror, to put it simply. They are scared that um they won't be able to handle what's in the mirror. I think a lot of times the anticipation is a lot scarier than the actual act. So just making that decision, just saying, I'm going to start making that conscious decision to look inwardly instead of run away from who, like, who I am. It's like that. What's that one poem? It's like by Marianne. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to me? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. I think a lot of the times we're afraid to look in the mirror because we're afraid to see our weaknesses, but again, we should have courage. What's the scariest truth I've had to admit to myself and what happened after? Hmm. Yeah, like I said, so everybody's different, but I think that for me, it's two things. One, that I'm either not enough, or the fact that I am doing enough. Like, as weird as that sounds, I think something I struggle with, like, knowing that, and this is obviously like very vulnerable for me to share, but I'm gonna share it anyways because that's what my podcast is about. But I would say, like, that I am enough and that I am doing enough, and I I just I struggle with sitting with that I'm okay and that I don't need to keep like overperforming or trying or just doing all these other things. I think I struggle with that. Next question. What's the hardest part of identifying an emotion's purpose? Hmm. I think the hardest part of identifying an emotion's purpose would be probably like doing the work. A lot of the times, I don't know, I think I tend to get lazy. I'm like, oh, I don't want to think about that. Like, what's the reason I'm feeling this sadness? I don't really want to deal with that right now. I don't really want to think about it. But taking the time to do the work goes a long way. Because at the end of the day, again, what's on the other side of that is our confidence. So the more that we avoid it, the more we are shying away from having some real, true confidence in ourselves. Can I share a real example where stopping and checking saved me from spiraling? Oh, great question. Yes. So my little sister, and I have this conversation a lot because, she does have these intrusive thoughts sometimes. And I tell her, Allison, you need to just like not let yourself think like that. And what do I mean by that? Like sometimes when we're so like negative in our thinking, it can become like a ball rolling down a hill. The the more that the ball rolls down and rolls down, it'll catch like debris, it'll catch stuff, and it'll start becoming bigger and bigger, and it'll start going faster and faster and faster and faster to the point where it's uncontrollable. So a lot of the times you need to just stop yourself from thinking um like negatively and spiraling into more deeper thoughts, right? So the way that I do that, sometimes I literally like I probably look insane, but I'll be in the car and I will be like, or I'll like tap myself, or I'll go like this to my cheek. Um, it's it's actually there's a system with that. It's called tapping, so you can tap while you're thinking and talking to yourself. So oftentimes I'll do that to stop that train of thought. Also mindful meditation. I try not to make this podcast so much about like God, and even though I strongly believe in God and I love God, but I want to separate that because I want people to learn about their own intuition before diving in directly into believing in God and believing in like the spirit and things like that. When was the first time I realized that I wasn't being honest with myself? Oof. Okay. I don't know if I remember the first time. That's a little wild to claim to know. But I do remember a time when I wasn't being honest with myself and I didn't want to admit it. Um, I mean, there's been a lot of times in my life that I have done that. And we're so like wild as humans. Like, we will do so much to prove that we are being honest and that we are having the most integrity, or at least I do. But um I think there was a time when perhaps like I wasn't being the most obedient when it comes to like my religion, and I kept lying to myself, telling myself that I was, and it was little things that I was doing, but um I was telling myself, no, I'm so good, I'm so good, I'm so good. And I think God has a really awesome way of checking us and just reeling it back in and helping us to recognize our own errors. But I think humility is where it starts, and it goes a long way as well. What does it feel like in my body when I don't want to face my own emotions? Oof. I think it feels like ego. So now, I would consider myself a pretty confident person. And now I can recognize the difference between my confidence and my ego. If I'm ever like overperforming or I'm trying to be um, just like perfect, quote unquote, like I'm trying too hard to look a certain type of way or perform, I realize that that's ego. And when I have ego, it's usually because I'm trying to like avoid looking at my weaknesses. I'm like shying away from them. I'm like turning away. And I'm only like focusing on my strengths, quote unquote. But sometimes I'm like lying to myself because I don't want to see those negative aspects of myself at that moment. Perhaps I don't feel like strong enough or I don't feel capable enough at that moment. But again, making that decision and just saying, I'm going to be self aware, I'm going to start looking inwardly again, it opens up a lot of doors. And you don't have to tackle it all at once, it goes slowly over time. So, um, if self awareness were a mirror, what would you be most afraid to see? Like right now, I think I'm afraid of like my blind spots because I've done so much work on myself that I'm afraid to look at like the things that I'm not aware of, if that makes sense. I think again, like heartbreak is so beautiful because it does like give you a free, it's like a free evaluation. It's like after you finish like with a relationship, they just handed you like a list of everything that you need to work on. And that can be overwhelming or it can be amazing. It's just, I guess, the perspective that you choose to take on. But go to the next question because I do not know how to finish that one. And I'm not perfect, you guys. I'm like just sharing what's worked for me and what I've done in the past and stuff. But I I don't claim to be like some spiritual guru or like a therapist. I'm not a therapist. I'm still learning myself, and I think as I'm learning, I'm just trying to teach what I know. So don't expect perfection either, please. I am not perfect. What comes to mind when you hear self awareness? When I hear self awareness, I hear both my weaknesses and my strengths. That's self awareness, like being aware of my weaknesses and my strengths. It's like an umbrella of a word, so there's like a lot that goes into it. But I would say that being being aware of both of those, it's like sometimes when people try to project things onto me and they're like, oh, you did this. I'm like, that doesn't sound like me because I know myself. I know both my weaknesses and I know my strengths. And I think that also brings a sense of confidence because I know exactly what I'm good at and exactly what I'm not good at. So, and the place when there's things that I'm not good at or are my weaknesses, I am open to learning. I'm open to learning. How do you know when you've gone from healthy reflection to unhealthy rumination? Oh, that's a good question because I do tend to ruminate, especially after relationships. Especially because like most of my relationships have not brought a sense of closure for me. Like I've had to find my own closure, and that's been very difficult. Like navigating that. So, like ruminating, like is this really over? If it's over, like what? Like how do I give myself my closure? Like just so many different thoughts, right? The way that I would say that I have found to differentiate those two is like when you're in healthy when you're in healthy reflection, um you feel like you're progressing. When you're in rumination or when you're in ruminating over the past, it feels like you're stuck and you don't really know how to move forward. um but again, whenever you do feel that, that's like a check-in that you're like, okay, it's time to be self-aware, it's time to like look inwardly. I believe in 100% accountability. So anytime something has ever happened, I'm always like, okay, time for me to look inward, because regardless of what the other person did, regardless if I was like a victim in the situation, which again I don't believe really in victimhood, but sorry, I need a little drinky drink break. All right, regardless of what the other person did, I believe in my personal accountability and my personal like reflection, self-reflection. I believe in looking inwardly and saying, what did I do wrong in this situation? What could I have done better? And starting from there. And it's such a beautiful place to be because it gives me a starting point instead of it just being like all this minutia. It gives me a starting point to be a better person. Because I don't know about y'all, but if you're watching my podcast, it must mean that you resonate resonate with some of the things that I have said. And I believe strongly in personal progress. If there's one thing that I believe in, it's one of my values, and it makes me happy. So if you're here, I would hope our light went out too. I would hope that that's one of your motivators as well. What is one small, safe way someone can begin practicing self awareness today? Great question. So, I have this book here. It's one of my favorite books. It's called, well, that's not true. It's just a good book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And there is a method that they use to turning the negative into a positive. So I can understand how looking in the mirror can be a little overwhelming, because a lot of times people fall into this dichotomy of, it's like a black and white of either hating themselves, like despising themselves, or this ego and this like arrogance. And so a lot of times people feel safer on this side of the spectrum, and they're afraid to look inwardly because they don't want to hate on themselves. But there is a healthy medium. You can look at yourself with kindness and compassion, and I believe that's one of the questions. But how can we turn some of those negative feelings into a positive? Okay, there is an acronym here. It's called RISE. So recognize the emotion. Okay, sitting with the emotion, recognizing what the emotion is. Oh, I just identified this weakness in myself. Dang it. That makes me feel sad, or it makes me feel vulnerable, or it makes me feel some type of way. One, identify your emotions purpose. So why is this making me sad? Is this a warning? Is this my brain's way of offering me protection? Is it designed to motivate me in some way to make a change? Just analyzing that, right? Stop and check is S. So RIS. Stop and check. Most of the time, it says here, these emotions are justified, but sometimes they're misguided. So pause to consider if you have all the facts before reacting in anger towards a person. And then last, establish a plan. Time to figure out how to be proactive about the situation. A lot of the times people stay stuck in those cycles of like, oh, this is the way I feel, I'm ruminating, I'm staying there. But it's important to move forward and create a plan of action. Okay, I feel sad. How am I going to get out of it? I'm going to give myself 2 days, 3 days, a week, however long, to feel what I'm feeling. And then I'm going to move forward after that. Last question. What role does compassion play in self awareness? And this was the question I was looking for. Yay! Again, I think one of the biggest reasons why people avoid looking inwardly is because they're afraid of that dichotomy of either the arrogance or the self hatred. And it's so, so important to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and hold those weaknesses with compassion and love and say, I am not a perfect person, but you know what? That's what makes me beautiful, as cliche as that sounds. Because have you ever looked at somebody that looks way too like perfect? Like they're like almost like a robot. Like they're not like that beautiful when you really look at them. If you think about the people that you think are the most beautiful, they usually have weaknesses attached to them. They just have a beautiful way, a graceful way of carrying those weaknesses. So, if there's one challenge that I want to leave you guys with today, it's to look at yourself in the mirror. Spend 5 minutes, set a timer on your phone, 5 minutes, and just look at yourself in the mirror like this. Be as deep or as far as you want to be with the mirror, but look at it for 5 minutes and just see what comes up. Just see what comes up. If it's, oh my gosh, I love myself, great. And if it's, oh my gosh, I have this flaw, you start like looking at your skin, start looking at like whatever. Either way, just challenge yourself to just continue until the 5 minutes are up. Once the 5 minutes are up, sit with it. Maybe set another timer for 5 minutes and just sit with the feelings. Maybe write them down. Like, how did this make me feel, and why? Use the RISE method if there's any negative emotions that come up. But if there's one challenge that I want you guys to do is to treat yourself with compassion. Be kind to yourself. I should have worn my shirt that says be kind. But be kind to yourself, because being kind to yourself is probably the single most important thing that you can do for this world. When we treat ourselves with kindness, we treat other people with kindness. And I want to end this episode with my favorite yoga saying. In yoga, there is a saying that you guys have probably heard. It is, they usually will bow in practice and say namaste. And what namaste means is the divine in me sees and acknowledges the divine in you. And I think it's so beautiful. It's like our divinity my divine sees your divine, and I can hold space for that. I love you guys so much, and thank you for everyone who's reached out, who's said thank you in some way or another. I love you guys, and I look forward to seeing you next episode. Bye.